Welcome to the April Garden Calendar. In this episode, we will look at what plants will be blooming, what needs fertilizing, what to prune and spray, and also a brief segment on lawn care. We will look at attracting hummingbirds to your yard. In our video segment, we will discuss the benefits of raised bed gardening. And finally, we will look at planting your garden. All this and more in this episode of the April Garden Calendar. Plants in flower for the month of April include crabapple, Carolina silverbell, dogwood, redbud, flowering cherry, viburnum, lilac, sweet shrub, azaleas, Banks rose, Exbury azalea, spirea, pieris, leucotha or dog hobble, weigela, wisteria, periwinkle, ajuga, candy tuft, violets, columbine, trillium, dwarf iris, bloodroot, bleeding heart, jack in the pulpit, and many more. Fertilize your shrubs, your perennials, your blueberry plants, and even shade trees if not done in March. Once you can determine whether your fruit trees have any fruit, you can decide how much fertilizer to give them also. As far as the vegetable garden goes, it would be great to soil test. Be sure to incorporate your fertilizer and lime as you prepare your garden beds. If space is limited, concentrate on vegetables that yield the greatest return for your effort, such as pole beans, tomatoes, cabbage, root crops, and leafy greens. Plan for year-round production through successive plantings. If practical, run rows east and west. Group your tall-growing crops together on the north side so that they won't shade the shorter plants. Locate your garden near a source of water for irrigation and on fertile, well-drained soil. Avoid areas near trees and large shrubs because your garden will need full sunlight. Have your soil analyzed. Our county extension center has soil test kits we can give you. If the soil is crusty and sticky, add a material such as old sawdust or compost to improve its tilth. Broadcast and till in your fertilizer and lime if needed, or apply it in furrows 3 inches to either side of the row in which your seeds or transplants will be planted. Side dress with a lighter application of nitrogen every 2 to 3 weeks, using 2 cups of 10-10-10 per 100 feet of row. To avoid fertilizer injury, keep the side dressing material 4 to 6 inches from the stems of the plant. Plant seeds 2 to 3 times as deep as the greatest diameter of the seed. Cover the seed and firm the soil lightly. Water young transplants with a starter solution made by dissolving 3 level teaspoons of 10-10-10 fertilizer in a gallon of water. For plants in peat cups or cubes, be sure to cover the containers well with soil when you transplant them in the garden. Provide temporary shade for tender transplants for 2 to 3 days after you set them out. And mulching. Mulching helps to conserve moisture. It reduces weeds and reduces erosion in the garden. Use leaves, old shavings, straw, black plastic, newspaper, or compost. Organic mulches keep the soil cool. Plastic mulches increase the soil temperature early in the growing season. So there you go, several tips for planting your garden this April. Prune spring flowering plants like azalea, lilac, forsythia, spirea, and weigela after the flowers fade. Prune your berry-producing shrubs like holly and pyracantha while in flower to prevent complete removal of all of this season's berries. Trim your spring flowering trees like Bradford pear, flowering cherry, and redbud. Cut out any winter damage that may have occurred this year. Spray broccoli, cabbage, and cauliflower for worms if needed. If you've planted your squash plants already, spray near the base of the stem to control squash borer. Continue that through June 1st and use only the recommended insecticides. Begin your weekly tree fruit sprays after the flower petals fall. Start a fungicide spray program for your bunch grapes this month and follow with weekly sprays. Scout or observe your landscape plants before spraying. Pests may not be present, so spray only when pests or diseases are present. Hummingbirds are amazing to watch as they hum back and forth, playing with each other as they challenge a neighbor for a certain flower or drink out of the hummingbird feeder. They work all day to feed themselves and their family. Well, you too can have your own colony of hummers. A small area such as a backyard can be retrofitted to bring in several beautiful miniature hummingbirds if planted correctly, especially with the addition of 1 or 2 hummingbird feeders. There are several known trees, shrubs, and perennial flowers that attract hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are attracted to sunny areas, so make sure your intended planting site has plenty of sun. So let's look at some plants that attract hummingbirds. Plant your taller trees such as red buckeye, flowering crabapple, hawthorn, and mimosa in the very back of your garden. Next, plant your shrubs, butterfly bush, flowering quince, wisteria shrub, weigelia, and lilac in front of your trees. Some vines you might incorporate are trumpet creeper, honeysuckle, clematis, and yellow jasmine. Next, plant perennial flowers close to your house or your viewing area. There are many flowers that hummingbirds enjoy: garden phlox, coral bells, bee balm, red hot poker, hardy fuchsia, tiger lily, hardy hibiscus, cardinal flower, hollyhock, columbine, larkspur, Indian paintbrush, jewelweed, rose mallow, foxglove, snapdragon, sage, verbena, sweet williams, and many more. Red is known to attract hummingbirds, but if you are having problems with other insects visiting your feeder, stay away from the color yellow. Yellow is known to attract insects such as bees and wasps. Bee guards are a feature to look for when purchasing your feeder. Also, some feeders have ant moats built into their design just above the main portion of the feeder. While hanging a feeder will definitely get you on your way to viewing the ruby-throated hummingbird, flowers will help even more. These beautiful creatures love anything red, but bright pinks, roses, oranges, and purples will also entice them. They seem to prefer the nectar from tubular flowers such as crossvine, Carolina jasmine, and red buckeye, but also love many of the others. Plant this permanent garden just for the hummingbirds, or create a beautiful patio with some of the above plants using potted plants and hanging baskets. Ruby-throated hummingbirds are very curious creatures and will investigate any source of food, even if it is close to a house. Hummingbirds have even been photographed resting on a person's hand. So enjoy the hummingbird season while it lasts. We should continue to see the hummers until about October. So while they are here, fill your feeders and get dirty planting your hummingbird gardens. In this segment, we're going to talk about raised bed gardens and why you might want to have one. So to start off with, we're going to look at advantages. One thing is that a raised bed garden drains very well. So if we have plenty of rainfall, 5-6 inches, it's going to drain right through this good, rich organic soil. Whereas in a traditional garden, it may stand up, pond, cause a lot of diseases and root problems we have on beans and other vegetables. So that's an advantage, that it drains well. Another advantage is the soil type. You can control the soil type. You don't have that old hard clay, that soil type that's typically around our county. You mix in compost, some good rich topsoil, mix in a little bit of sand here to help it drain well. So you control the soil type, and it's so much more fertile and much more productive. Also, it's in a condensed space, so there's much less weeding. Not all that weeding you have to do it with a hoe in a traditional garden. It's condensed, so the plants tend to shade out weeds, and it's just less chores in this type of garden. And then another thing, of course, is typically it's a little bit higher, so it's easier on you than traditional planting. It's easier on your back. You don't have to reach down as far. Some things about a raised bed garden. One thing is try to position it so that it runs east to west if possible. So one side of your garden is facing the south, which is the case with my garden beds here. The right side is the south facing. And one reason you do this is if you have taller plants, you can plant them on the north side. Like I'll usually plant my tomato plants and maybe my pole beans that run up a trellis on this north or back side. And then, of course, that's not shading out my smaller plants in the front. Also, you need to put your garden where it gets plenty of sunshine, at least 8 hours of sunshine a day. So that's important, if at all possible, as well. And of course, put it near a water source, as you're going to need plenty of water. At some point in time, you're going to have to water. Vegetables need at least an inch of water per week. So we're going to show you I use drip irrigation here. You can use soaker hose or some other source, but it's during our hot, long summer months, you're going to need to add some water. Another point about raised bed gardens, the size. Let's look at the size. We really would like, it's needed to make these 4 foot wide. So a person can reach 2 foot across and weed or plant or whatever. But if you make it 5 or 6 foot wide, there's going to be a gap in the middle you can't get to. The length doesn't matter. It can be 4 foot long, 8 foot long, 12, 16. However, the length doesn't matter. I think these beds here are 12 foot long, but it doesn't matter on the length, just the width. And then the depth, it's really good to get it 10 inches deep if possible for most vegetables. Lettuce and onions, things like that, can go with about 8 inches. And my bed here, it's about 12 inches deep on the lower end. Up there, it's just 6 inches by the board, but I actually dug down with a tiller, and so there's 8 or 10 inches of good soil there for those plants to grow in at the upper end. So if you don't have the depth of the board, go in there and churn up that soil with a tiller and mix in your soil and organic matter. One thing I want to mention too is we talked about how compact it is, how you can get a lot of production here. What I like to do, as a lot of people do, is use the square foot gardening concept. And square foot gardening, there's a book, Square Foot Gardening by Mel Bartholomew. It's a great book. It tells how to plant in this intensive space. And what you do is you mark off your beds 1 foot segments. You can see my 1 foot mark, 2 foot, 3 foot, and then likewise do it down the length. And then you can mark off lines with a string or a pole and just kind of scratch the surface with a trowel, something like that, so you can get your square foot segments. And then based on square foot gardening concept, you can plant things very densely. You can plant 16 onions in 1 square foot of your garden bed. You can plant 9 snap beans. 4 lettuce plants will go in a square foot. 1 pepper. It actually takes 2 square foot for a squash, and it takes 4 square feet for a tomato plant. But that's all spelled out in the Square Foot Gardening book, and it's a great way to plant a raised bed. And another thing I'll mention here is some of these plants can use trellising. Tomatoes, pole beans, sugar snap peas. In my garden here, I've got 2 little circles of sugar snap peas coming up. And I'll use a tomato cage. I'll stick it right in the center there, and they'll use that as a trellis to climb up it. You can use tomato cages for trellis. You can actually, like on the north side, put some posts and maybe string some woven wire or cattle wire and make a wire trellis in the back side of your garden for beans or something to climb up. Even cucumbers can be trained to grow on a trellis. So you can do that easily and maximize your space here in the garden. Plants growing up a trellis, not growing flat there on your bed. So you can plant more things in your raised bed garden. Maintain your mowing height of fescue and cool season turf at 3 to 4 inches. Do not fertilize your lawn in the month of April. Now is the time to begin your spot treatment of summer annual broadleaf weeds. This is a good time to layer new plants by lowering a branch of your favorite shrub and covering it with soil and a stone. Visit your local garden centers and nurseries to see what plants and products are available. Now's the time to get out there and get to planting. Mulch all of your landscape plants as needed. Pine needles, pine or hardwood mulch, and pine bark are all good mulches. Well, we hope you've enjoyed our garden calendar. If you have questions, call us at 632-4451 or visit us at our website at alexanderextension.com, where there's lots of helpful information and events, and you can also sign up for a monthly newsletter there. That's alexanderextension.com, or stop by and visit us at the Alexander County Service Center at 151 West Main Avenue. Hope to hear from you soon.